One of the most misunderstood systems of Hmong local administration and governance is the Kaitong and Tasseng systems. It is a complex and nuanced political arrangement for the Hmong that existed before acceptable historical records were kept. And we must not make the mistake of putting a Western narrative into a political system developed in Southeast Asia, with an amalgamation of various Southeast Asian cultures, which included the Lao, the Vietnamese, the Highland Khai, and the Hmong. From the 1850s to the time of Pat Kai's rebellion in 1918, the obscure system of Kaitongs or Kitong in Hmong was put in place to govern the political administration of the newly arrived Hmong tribesmen within the Muong Phuan kingdom, abutting what is now the modern-day lands of Siêng province, Laos. Nowhere else outside of the Hmong of Siêng or the Muong Phuan kingdom, as Siêng was originally called in the 1800s, does any Hmong population groups have the title of Kaitong to denote their leaders. Not in China, where the Hmong originated, nor in any of the other Southeast Asian nations where the Hmong settled into, that of Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, or the other lands of Laos outside of Siêng. To understand why this is, we have to understand the history of Laos and the history of Southeast Asia during the mid-1800s. Looking back at that time, the modern concept of nation-state borders and political relationships of what we are accustomed to today did not exist in that part of the world. A time when the Hmong made their migrations into Southeast Asia from China, Laos itself, as we know it today, did not even exist as a united entity in the modern sense. Laos was divided into several kingdoms and principalities, with a web of political and diplomatic relationships with each other. There was the kingdom of Vientiane, which was annexed by Siam in 1828, the kingdom of Luang Prabang, the kingdom of Muong Phuan, and the kingdom of Champasak. In Southeast Asia at that time, the mandala system of regional political governance was practiced by these kingdoms, whereby a relatively minor power, such as the Muong Phuan kingdom, would pay homage to a stronger neighbor, such as the kingdom of Vientiane, and that kingdom would in turn pay homage to the regional hegemon, which was the kingdom of Siam. Other times when diplomacy required it, the small states like the Muong Phuan would pay homage to its equally powerful neighbors, such as the kingdoms of Siam and Vietnam simultaneously. When the Hmong began arriving onto the territory of the Muong Phuan kingdom, this small Laotian kingdom was in the midst of a power struggle between two regional powers bordering it, which was Siam and Vietnam. Unfortunately for the Muong Phuan king, Cao Noi, and the Muong Phuan kingdom, as they were trying to play off the two rivals against each other, Vietnam, being fed up by Muong Phuan's disloyalty, invaded Muong Phuan in the 1830s. The Muong Phuan king and his armies were defeated, and he was captured by the Vietnamese. The Muong Phuan king, his family, and his court was brought to Hue, Vietnam as political prisoners. The king was executed by the Vietnamese for rebelling against his overlord, the Emperor Minh Mang of Vietnam. The Muong Phuan king's two sons would be brought up under Vietnamese guidance as political prisoners. When the two young Muong Phuan princes came of age, they were sent back to Muong Phuan to rule as vassal kings, being king and Nuuparat in the Lao Thai political tradition. These sons of the Muong Phuan king returned home with Vietnamese advisors and retainers under strong Vietnamese influences. The Muong Phuan kingdom was originally ruled by King Cao Po, and when he passed away, his younger brother, the Uparat, meaning viceroy or second king, Prince Cao Ong, was made the next king of the Muong Phuan kingdom. By the time the Hmong began to make noise in the Muong Phuan kingdom, King Cao Ong was ruling the kingdom as a Vietnamese vassal. Eventually, by the 1870s, the Muong Phuan kingdom switched their allegiances from Vietnam to Siam. Even though the Muong Phuan court maintained many of its Vietnamese influences. Then, in 1872, the Black Flag bandit armies stationed in North Vietnam invaded northern Laos. The Lao kingdoms of Luang Prabang and Muong Phuan were ravaged by the Black Flags. In Muong Phuan, the king sought aid from the Hmong tribes in his land. Many different Hmong clans answered the call and assisted the king in fighting off the Black Flag armies. The level and amount of involvement each of the different Hmong clans and sub-clans rendered varied from location to location. One group that did offer assistance was the Li clan leaders of the Nong Het region, who, with a larger clan base, was able to field a sizable fighting force to aid the Muong Phuan king. The Muong Phuan court would note their assistance. When the Black Flags finally were defeated in 1876 and returned back into North Vietnam, the leaders of this Hmong group were awarded titles by the Muong Phuan king, one of that title being Kaitong, or Kitong as pronounced in Hmong, meaning little king in Vietnamese. The Muong Phuan king had strong Vietnamese influences from his time as a political prisoner in Vietnam. Hence, he dug into an obscure etymology and gave out Lao Vietnamese titles such as Sao Phe, Trong Khong, Trong Cha, Phu Tong, and Kitong to various Hmong chieftains inside his kingdom. When the Li of Nong Het rendered assistance to the king, the Li chieftain was made into a Kaitong and given a seal of office. This Li Kaitong was named Li Nha Vu. It is not known when the Muong Phuan kings started the process of anointing the Hmong chieftains with these titles, like the one Li Nha Vu had. But there were certainly many Hmong Phu Tongs and probably many Hmong Kaitongs before the Li brothers approached the Muong Phuan court. Unfortunately, those occurrences were not recorded in the history books for our benefit. From Tumilifong, a prominent Hmong from a different branch of the Li clan, in writing 100 years after the time of the Kaitongs, he mentioned in his memoir a conversation he had with an elderly administrator of the Muong Kham district. Muong Kham was an area of Muong Phuan organized territory that was closest to the Hmong Mountains during the late 1800s. This Muong Phuan administrator relayed that in the beginning, the newly arrived Hmong clans and their chieftains were each awarded with the title of Phu Tong. At first, there was only one Phu Tong chosen among the Hmong in the mountains to represent their needs to the Muong Phuan court. But as the Hmong population grew and new powerful Hmong chieftains from China and Vietnam arrived, new loyalties and kinship relationships forced the Muong Phuan court to award new Phu Tongs to more and more chiefs. It was not until the time of the Black Flags that we see the title of Kaitong being awarded to the Hmong. This may be due to the greater needs or dire situation that the Black Flag invasion created for the Muong Phuan king. thus forcing the Muong Phuan king to give greater rewards and titles to his new Hmong subjects. Now, in other parts of Laos, the title of Kaitong was not awarded nor known to be bestowed on any other Hmong groups. The Muong Phuan king's influence was limited to his territory. Erstwhile, the kingdom of Luang Prabang had its own political structure and system of patronage for its tribal confederates. In Luang Prabang and Sumner provinces, Hmong chieftains were awarded with the title of Fei instead, which appears to be borrowed or rooted in the Lao Highland Thai title of Sao Fei. By the time of the French, 5 Hmong chiefs in Sumner province were awarded with the title of Fei by the French administrators in the aftermath of Patai's rebellion from 1918 to 1922. These Hmong Feis would rule for a time, but their offices went into discontinuation as infrastructure and the language barriers between the Highland Hmong in Sumner and the French administration were too difficult. In 1920, during the height of Patai's rebellion, as the French paid more attention to Hmong affairs, the French, in re-administering the unruly Hmong, they instituted a more Luang Prabang-centric administrative system and made Kitong Lum Le Yao a Tasseng, or a fully Lao title that meant sub-district chief, instead of continuing his Kitong title. By now, the Luang Prabang kingdom was made as the center of what Laos would later become under the French colonial empire. Whereas the Kitong or Kaitong title was relational and tribal in its governance of the population, which a Kitong governed the people of a Hmong chieftain's clan members or cluster of several clans that were personally loyal to him. A Kitong was not tied to a physical constituency like a Tasseng. The Tasseng was a more geographic position, and its office was tied to a specific location. The Tasseng was in charge of a geographic sub-district of the Muong sub-province. When the French made Kitong Lubliao a Tasseng during Patai's rebellion, he scoffed at the notion and proclaimed that his title of Kitong was more prestigious, as it was historically anointed by a king, whereas a Tasseng was given by the French through the Lao Ministry of the Interior only, which was based in Luang Prabang City, far from Kitong Lumiao's base of power in Nong Het of Siêng Khoang province. Both the Tasseng and the Kitong offices were not hereditary. These titles were appointments that were made by the Muong Phuan court and later by the French-appointed governing body of Siêng Khoang province. However, appointments in practice were usually given from father to son for both Tasseng and Kitong offices. One would be incorrect, though, to equate the Kitong or Little King title with the Western concept of hereditary kings. Another misconception is that the Kitong title was passed down from one Kitong and their clan to another Hmong chief and his clan through time. Of note, there were many contemporary Kitongs that were anointed and ruled at the same time. There were many from other clans, such as the Mua, Yang, and Zhong clans that existed, as compared to the more well-known Li Kaitongs, Lower Kaitongs, and the Muong Kaitongs of the Pudu area. For example, when Li Nivu was Kitong, there was a Lo Kitong named Lo Patsi, with control over his own Lo clan in the same Nong Het area. One watershed moment for the Hmong was the Hmong Kitong Rebellion of 1893, where the Kitongs of the Li, Lower, and Muong clans of the Nong Het region bounded their clansmen together to fight the French over heavy taxation on the Hmong. In the aftermath of the Hmong Kitong rebellion, the Muong Kaitongs emerged supreme over the Hmong of the Nong Het region. The Muong Kaitongs was the chief negotiator on behalf of the Hmong forces fighting against the French. His negotiated compromise with the French earned him recognition from the French and the Hmong that he would be the representative for all the Hmong of the Nong Het region, essentially making him a first among equals with the other Hmong Kaitongs of the Nong Het region. It was from this tradition, or the Nong Het tradition as we would call it, that Kitong Lumbliyao would gain his supremacy and notoriety in Hmong history. For when the French were trying to construct Colonial Road 7 through Hmong territory and Nong Het, the Muong Kitong passed on his supremacy role and duties over to Kitong Lumbliyao. Here, Kitong Lumbliyao would go on to embody the Kitong in the Hmong popular narrative. Whereas in other parts of the Muong Phuan kingdom, other Hmong Kaitongs ruled concurrently with the Hmong Kaitongs in the Nong Het region. For example, in the Muong Phuan territories bordering the Kamkut region in the south, there was a Zhang Kaitong by the name Sai Cho Hyong who ruled there. He would play a role in providing refuge to fleeing Patay rebels when they were crushed by the French and Kitong Lumbliyao. This Zhang Kaitong was not part of the Nong Het tradition, but developed independently without ties of political kinship with the Hmong and Kaitongs of the Nong Het area. After the death of Kitong Lumbliyao, all other Hmong leaders were no longer exclusively clan chieftains, but men of letters and soldiers who had duties to fulfill to the French in local administration, or later General Vang Pao in the war effort. The Kitong title went to obsolescence, and the Hmong would govern with the Lao official administrative titles, ranking from lowest to highest, starting from Naiban, which was the village chief, the Tasseng, the sub-district chief, Naikong, the county chief or special administrative district chief, the Taomong, which was the district chief, and the Taopuan, who was the provincial governor. So with this, we hope we have shed some light to this often misunderstood and misinterpreted part of Hmong history. And with that, time marches on. Thank you.